Coup in Perspective. Welcome to another edition of State Affairs. State Affairs is a class of history, politics, and power. We have been on the stories of Nigeria's first military coup. A coup that Nzeogwu symbolizes. And Nzeogwu says our enemies are the political profiteers, the swindlers, the men in high and low places that seek bribes and demand 10%, those that seek to keep the country divided permanently so that they can remain in office as ministers or VIPs at least, the tribalist, the nepotist, those that make the country look big for nothing before international circle. Nzeogwu says our enemies are those that have contempt of our society and put the Nigerian political calendar back by their words and deeds. That was the broadcast of Major Kaduna Nzeogwu on the 15th of January 1966. This year, 2026, makes it 50 years after the coup, 60 years rather after the coup. 60 years after the coup, have we learned lessons? If we have learned lessons, why is Nigeria still struggling with insurgency? Why are bandits on rampage? If we have learnt lessons from the 1966 coups, why is Boko Haram looking so formidable that since 2009, the Nigerian state is yet to defeat Boko Haram? How do we explain the insurgencies in the southeast and the Niger Delta? How do we explain the rompers in the middle belt of Nigeria? Have we learnt lessons? If we've learnt lessons, how come Dubai is more advanced than Nigeria? If we have learnt lessons, how come we cannot compete with Singapore? Perhaps we need leaders that can imbibe the indestructible principles that make a man calm and dauntless. Remember, the wise one says, it is in the hour of crisis who decides who are minions of darkness and who the children of light. It is the epoch of threatening disaster, ruin, and persecution which divides the sheep from the goats and reveals to the reverential gaze of succeeding ages the men and women of power. Those are words of the wise one. So one must be imbued with divine love, purity, and compassion to attain inward harmony and achieve real power. These are the qualities of great thinkers. Philosophers are great thinkers. For nations to rise, they must be governed by philosopher kings, men of immense positive values that define and lead the spirit of the land. So the great man is he who in the midst of the crowds keep with perfect sweetness the independence of solitude That is why leadership in a chaotic state must move towards calmness and deep thought. So to grow in self-control, in patience, in love, is to grow in strength and power. These are the moral codes of societies preparing for advancement. Was that a society Nzeogwu and friends wanted to attain? Therefore, they launched a coup on the 15th of January, 1966. Did they have the character to attain such a society? It was a society that needed men of immense value, men of equity. So, if you have such men in power, it will produce strength for the nation, and the people of the country will move towards defining a guiding principle that illuminates their inward self and reproduce their inward self in innovative actions. It is when you have built such a society through well-structured education system that you then begin to create a knowledge economy. Was that what Nzeogwu and friends wanted to give Nigeria? They had an ideology, and they were out to achieve their ideology. So let's look at the ideological principles that guided the men who wanted to change Nigeria in a bloody way. Yes, they ran into troubled waters, the coup failed, but the legacy they left behind is what we are still discussing. In that case, did the coup fail? Why was struck is a primary text in this class, so we always refer to it. It is a book written by one of the executioners of the January 1966 coup, Adewale Ademoyiga. This is the book we're talking about, Why Was Struck, a primary text for state affairs. So you are encouraged to get your copy, read your copy, make informed decisions, and then learn from the actions of the majors that carried out the coup. If you turn to chapter 3 of the book, Why Was Struck, it is entitled The Ideology. Ideologically, the core of the revolutionary officers had agreed on a program of action to be implemented if we had successfully taken the reins of power into our hands. Ademoyiga writes, this program covered areas of politics, economy, education, social, and foreign affairs. Politically, we believed that our immediate step would be to correct the worst anomaly of the 1957 Constitution by breaking down the country into smaller units or states. You know, some have said that Obafemi Awolowo was meant to be the main beneficiary of the coup. Could that be true? Let's look at what Adewale Ademoyiga said. He said, politically, we believed that our immediate step would be to correct the worst anomaly of the 1957 Constitution by breaking the country into smaller units or states. Was that not what Awolowo canvassed for? Awolowo called for the breaking of the regions so that the minority would have their own regions. And here Adewale Ademoyega said that was exactly what they planned to do if the coup succeeded. He continues, in other words, the four regions which existed till January 15th, 1966 were to die instantly, and on their dead bodies were to emerge 14 states, each of which would be conterminous with two of the former 26 provinces of the Federation, except Sokoto and Oyo State, which were to be conterminous with one province each. In effect, there would be 7 states each in the former North and South. Hey, they wanted to create 14 states if the January coup had succeeded. After Gowon took over in July 1966, after the counter coup, he created 12 states. That was what Awolowo wanted before he was sent to prison. Adewale Ademoyega and co., if they had succeeded, wanted to create 14 states. Let's read. He says these states were to be governed by military governors who would be chosen on their merit and loyalty to the revolution. Now, we should begin to look at that analysis, that if they had succeeded, that Awolowo was meant to be the main beneficiary. I've heard that argument again and again. But reading Adewale Ademoyega's book, perhaps you will help me make sense of his points. He said the 14 states were to be governed by military governors who would be chosen on their merit and loyalty to the revolution. That means it would have been a military administration. So was Awolowo going to be the head of that military administration? I'm just thinking. Then he goes on to state, we also believed in the immediate release of political prisoners of those days, namely Chief Obafemi Awolowo, Jakonde, Anthony Nahuru, Onitiri, Omishade, and so on. As we saw it, these actions would bring immediate relief to the suffering masses of the West and North and would generate peace and concord throughout the Federation. Politically too, we embraced collective leadership and we planned to include both military and civilian personalities in the government. But the army would have the principal role of laying down and maintaining the principles and the momentum of the revolution. You want to help me? You know, I've heard that argument. Even Achike Udenwa made that argument in my interview with him. Yemi Farumbi made the same argument, that Obafemi Awolowo was meant to be the main beneficiary, that if Nzeogwu and Co. had succeeded, that Awolowo would have been made the leader. And I'm wondering, how would that have been possible, considering what Adewale Ademoyega wrote in his book? You see, I want you to join this discourse from this point. The number to call is on the screen. What do you think? Was Awolowo meant to be the main beneficiary of the coup, considering what Adewale Ademoyega had written here? Remember, we are yet to read the full book. But as we read, we analyze. So if it's some pages ahead, he comes out with that statement to say Awolowo was meant to be the main beneficiary. Then we will refer him to page 47 and tell him to resolve the contradiction. That is, if there is any. He says, politically too, we embraced collective leadership, and we planned to include both military and civilian personalities in the government, but the army would have the principal role of laying down and maintaining the principles and momentum of the revolution. Unlike those military leaders who cashed in on our revolution and ruled the people carelessly and without direction, we would certainly have created a mass political movement which would lead and vigilantly guide the nation along the path of pure democratic socialism. Yeah, that is it. So they wanted to drive home the ideology of democratic socialism. That is core. So at least we have a preamble of the intentions of the coup makers who failed when they struck. Indestructible principles make a man calm and dauntless. One must be imbued with divine love, purity, and compassion to attain inward harmony and achieve real power. The great man is he who in the midst of the crowd keeps with perfect sweetness the independence of solitude. To grow in self-control, in patience, and love is to grow in strength and power. To grow in power is to be a deep thinker. Was Nnamdi Azikiwe not a deep thinker? Was Awolowo not a deep thinker? If you read the collections of Nnamdi Azikiwe's speeches, you would see the power of his mind. If you turn to chapter 6 of this book, Zik, a selection from the speeches of Nnamdi Azikiwe, you would understand the politics of Zik. You know, he delivered a speech to the graduates of Stora College in the Anthony Memorial Hall, Harper's Ferry, West Virginia, United States of America, on June 2nd, 1947, on the occasion when the honorary degree of Doctor of Literature was conferred on him. He makes the point, according to the leaders of the Allied nations, we fought the last war in order to revive the stature of man and to make the four freedoms a living reality. I interpret those war and peace aims to mean the enjoyment of political freedom, social equality, economic security, and religious freedom everywhere in the world. That is Zik's philosophy. See? He said, I interpret those war and peace aims to mean the enjoyment of political freedom, social equality, economic security, and religious freedom everywhere in the world. When he became the president of Nigeria, was Zik able to achieve social equality for the people of Nigeria? Was Zik able to guarantee economic security and religious freedom everywhere in the world? In 1947, when he made this speech, did he know he was going to be the president of Nigeria at some point. Perhaps he should know. Because ambition should take your mind in that direction, especially when you are in the struggle. By this time, he had been a member of the Nigerian youth movement. So, Nnamdi Azikiwe, Obafemi Awolowo, Ahmadu Bello are critical to the issues that led to the January 1966 coup. Yes, we can take some calls, but WhatsApp calls only. WhatsApp calls. You know, we make references to books so that you can make your conclusion, as I make mine too. This is one book I'll be recommending to you today. Decolonizing Nigeria, 1945 to 1960. I have been reading about the coup. The more I read about the coup, the more I see how our politics led to the coup. And some of those political behaviors at the time that led to the coup, those behaviors are still with us. Okay, let's take this call. Hello? Hello?
Hello.
Yes, you're on.
Good afternoon, Mr. Bello.
I greet you.
It's always a delight to hear your voice every time. You had slated our meetings for Thursday. I was driving, I forgot about it, but I had it pop up on my phone, and I'm so glad I had the pop up. Thank you, sir, for the great work you do, and I'm connected to you live with another phone now while I'm driving. I just have a comment to make, something for you. Have you, in all that you do, thought about us, people that believe in this democratic socialism, people that have such ideas that you read out that has been the best part we should have taken in Nigeria? Have you sort of thought of us forming a think tank group, properly recognized to discuss issues, maybe quarterly, maybe biannually, maybe annually, something that can metamorphose into the kind of group of people that you want to lead this country? Because we seem to not have the right crop of leaders, the people that have the real spirit, the genuine will to do what Nigeria needs. It's such discussions that can lead to us having the right leaders, the right people. So yes, you are doing justice by taking us there every day online, but we need to come together too and sit down and discuss and grow into something, maybe a political party. So it's just a thought for you, sir. We have many counting on people like you that understand that it's the spirit of leadership that we lack in Nigeria. God will see you through. Thank you for all you do, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I like that thought. It's inspiring. But many of us are also thinking in that line. Let's watch as things unfold. We have a country to build, and we are learning from history. So you can still join the discourse. Call us on WhatsApp. We're here to pick your call. Yes, it is the Nzeogwu coup in perspective. And Obafemi Awolowo, Azikiwe, Ahmadu Bello, those names will continue to ring out from this microphone.
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, good afternoon. This is Okoli speaking.
Good afternoon.
Yeah, I want to talk about the discourse about the issue you raised, that
following the January 1966 coup, whether or not Awolowo was to be the main beneficiary. Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I know two things will happen, really. Now, I believe that for the coupists, we should also remember that these are revolutionalists. These are not people that will get into power, that will get power and just immediately hand it over to politicians, in which they already complained that the decay that was noticed in the government was actually because of the decadence of the politicians, how they are rendered the country almost useless due to corruption. So I believe that, one, the Awolowo will be released. Whether or not he will become the president, he will be handed the president, is a different ball game entirely. Maybe after some time, he might be handed over, the government might be handed over to him, or he might be given the power immediately, which I don't even believe. Because these are revolutionaries. They are not people that do just get power and hand it over to politicians immediately. Then you ask, what is the purpose of the coup in the first instance? They're trying to clean up. Remember, Awolowo too was part of the cabal, depending on how you look at it. So I believe Awolowo is part of those people. So he will be released. That one is certain. But whether the power will be handed over to him is a different discourse totally. I tend to go along with the discourse of Major Ademoyega because he is a primary source of information, and whatever he has written is directly as it was, as the status quo was as of January 15, 1966. Thank you very much for the good work you are doing, Mr. Obilo. I am enjoying your discourse. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, the discourse is on. And it's from discourses like this that we'll learn from each other. So that is why here we make references to books. Now, I talked about Nnamdi Azikiwe, Obafemi Awolowo, and Ahmadu Bello. How did their politics lead to the January 1966 coup? If you read this book by Professor Tony Falola and Dr. Bola Dauda, Decolonizing Nigeria 1945 to 1960, Politics, Power and Personalities, is a book of history, deep book of history. When Falola writes a book, I don't need to tell you about the quality. But this is what they said here. I'm going to look at this chapter, the Nigerian nationalist triad, Ahmadu Bello, Nnamdi Azikiwe, and Obafemi Awolowo. That is chapter 9 of the book. They said the central characters that we here call the nationalist triad, Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe, Chief Obafemi Awolowo, and Sir Ahmadu Bello, set the rules of the late colonial era's political game. With the death of Herbert Macaulay in 1946, no other Nigerian leader competed with the triad as the founding fathers of the pre-independence Nigeria. In their place as founding fathers, Nigeria as a nation was putty in their hands. Those three men set the agenda for the national politics. They molded the constitution, they formed the political parties, they established the values, they set up the constitutional institutions for sharing the values of power and the wealth of the nation. And they dispensed both the rewards for conformity to the norms and the punishment for breaching the shared values and customs. Thus, each one's part in the Nigerian dream is that of the dreamer or visionary, and as such, they were the script writers, the producers, the actors, and at times the audience. I just read from page 326 of the book Decolonizing Nigeria, chapter 9, with the title The Nigerian Nationalist Triad, a book written by Professor Tony Falola and Dr. Bola Dauda. Are you reading books like this? Let's read. Reading is feeding the mind. As you feed your mind, you grow in knowledge and calmness. As you grow in calmness, you become a deep thinker. So sometimes you will search for solitude to refresh your mind. Such is time. Such is the value of the search for knowledge. Remember, redemption comes when a people in search of peace, justice, and progress hold on to kind aspirations, and they chose for themselves leaders skilled in the ideals of effective leadership. Hold this as an infallible truth. Now, I want us to listen to this public debate between Osita Chidoka and Professor Tunji Olaokpa. It is a debate of the actions of the men of power. In this debate, Awolowo and Azikiwe were placed on the slaughter's table. Was Chidoka too hard? Was Tunji Olaokpa too soft? Let's go into their discourse. I was in that hall that day in 2016. That was 10 years ago, just like yesterday. Okay, so let's go back to that hall and listen to this debate.
I think that this is a very interesting conversation, and I will not. I think that this is a very interesting conversation, and I will not allow it to go without making this intervention. Number one, we have to let go of falsehood in Nigeria if we want to make progress. And there are fallacies that have continued to plague Nigeria. Number one of them is that we had a wonderful past and leaders who were honest and straightforward, and now the barbarians have come and are eating at the barn. Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe was found guilty for diverting government money to fund ACB by Walter Sutton panel. That panel found him guilty, and Zik only pleaded political persecution. He diverted government money into ACB Bank, which was a private business of Zik. And this was a petition arising from an NCNC member, Mr. Eya, and Zik lost those shares. That's how ACB became a government bank. Chief Obafemi Awolowo in 1962, when Majekudumi set up a panel, Coca Commission of Inquiry into the affairs of certain parastatals in Western Nigeria, was described as running an ingenious scheme to divert government funds for private use. He was described as reckless and brazen in the way he diverted the funds of the Western Nigerian Marketing Board, which had about £6 million at the time Awolowo became premier. And by the time he left, they were in deficit of £2.something million. He was also found to have diverted government money to private individuals called the Nigerian National Investment Company, led by Chief Alfred Rewane, S.O. Badamosi, and other people, and two others, including Shoni Barre. And those loans given to the company, of the £6 million they got, only 500,000 was paid back. The rest was diverted to the Action Group. In his own book, My March Through Prison, Awolowo recounted in his own book that this was a plan they had to raise money using those companies and later convert those monies to the Action Group, because they had studied the Labour Party of Israel and found out that the Labour Party of Israel was a very rich party who had resources and those resources made it possible for the party not to be controlled by rich individuals. Why was Awolowo looking for ways to fund UP Action Group without the individuals? He was looking because by 1962, he had almost lost the party to the rich people. So why I'm giving you this background is that what happened in 2015 also happened in 1983. Chief Bola Egede took 2 million naira bribe from Great Nigerian Insurance Company to fund Action Group. He was found guilty by General Buhari's tribunal and went to prison. He was later granted pardon by General Babangida. So the question is, how do we go forward in Nigeria? Announcing catching the thieves will not solve the problem. We need to find out, how did our system fail so much that no civil servant has been known to come out to say, I did not allow Colonel Dasuki to transfer this money? How come no civil servant said so? How come the civil servants in the office of the NSA put the money together under a guise of supply of vehicles and transferred it to individual accounts? We need to go beyond catching the thief to finding out why our system failed. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
This is really not a substantive contribution, but I see some dimensions, of non-sequitur, something that will regress into overgeneralization, building up. I thought the contribution of Chief, my brother Osita Chidoka, was very, very solid, but it should be appreciated in the discussion with discernment. And my sense is that we should not try to wear lenses that are searching for saints, when indeed we are searching for heroes. Heroes are sinners, but there are elements in their contributions that constitute the benchmarks that define the standard of their age and remain ideals that are sustained over time, and that's what makes them heroes. If you look into the lives of Abraham Lincoln, Winston Churchill, Martin Luther King, you'll be sorry about some of the untold stories about them. David was a murderer, but in the godly standard, he lived up to the ideal work, ideal standard that were worth canonizing in the scripture. Leaders of a generation are so called because they are discerning enough to be able to see into the seed of time and to see those ones that can germinate and are worth, reinvesting for the purpose of building the future. That they had failing, that the lives of Awolowo and Azikiwe had failing, did not make them any less heroes. It's just that they were not gods. If you read the wrong, if you as a Christian, for example, you read the wrong narratives, like the Da Vinci Code, you might as well be questioning whether Jesus was ever what the Bible claims it to be. I thank you very much.
Interesting debate, you would say. What do you think about that debate? Osita Chidoka and Professor Tunji Olaokpa in 2016. That's 2016. So in that conversation, the personalities of Obafemi Awolowo and Nnamdi Azikiwe were called to question owing to the charges brought against them in the course of their politics. The issues raised by Osita Chidoka, former Minister of Aviation, and countered by Tunji Olaokpa, former Permanent Secretary, are of concern because they throw light on the events of the past. It is the understanding of the past that determines a transformative future. Yes, Obafemi Awolowo faced the Coca Commission, set up to investigate the finances of the Western region. Awois saw the commission as a grand plan to humiliate their highly revered leader, who was not in good terms with the North, led by Ahmadu Bello and Tafawa Balewa. The Prime Minister Balewa, with the support of Samuel Ladoke Akintola in the Western region, deployed federal power to check the glowing profile of Obafemi Awolowo. The discontent caused by the Commission's findings added to the political instability in the Western region, culminating in Operation Wertier, when thousands were killed to settle political scores. The carnage was a reaction against the rigged 1965 Western Region election to keep the Akintola faction in charge of the Western region with the backing of the federal administration led by Tafawa Balewa. Awolowo by this time was in prison, having been convicted on charges of plotting to overthrow the Tafawa Balewa government. So the disputed election was the last straw that broke the camel's back. Following Operation Wertier was the January 1966 coup. So can we say that the politics of Obafemi Awolowo was one of the reasons for the January 1966 coup? In the case of Zik of Africa, E.O. Ayo, the chief whip of the Eastern Region government, had on the 30th of April 1956 raised the motion of gross abuse of office against his party leader and premier of the Eastern Region, Nnamdi Azikiwe. He accused Zik of diverting £2 million of public money into the African Continental Bank, ACB. When we were growing up, ACB was one of the big banks in Nigeria. So at this time that Ayo wrote his petition, Zik had substantial interest in the bank. Sir Stamford Foster Sutton, the federal chief justice, was the head of the tribunal that investigated the allegation against Azikiwe. In its verdict, the tribunal reprimanded Azikiwe for a conduct that had fallen short of the expectations of honest, reasonable people. The verdict of the tribunal was condemned by Zikist, who saw the 2 million deposit in a bank established to protect the Eastern Region interest as a way of liberalizing credit for the Igbo people. They hailed Zik for acting in the interest of the people and for positioning a bank capable of breaking the monopoly of the British banks in Nigeria. So I've given you a background of that argument between Osita Chidoka and Tunji Olaoba. What do you think? We want to hear from you. The number to call is scrolling on the screen. And most of the books we read here, you'll find them on udarabooks.com. udarabooks.com. You can also get them through the same WhatsApp number by sending us a WhatsApp message, and we'll take it up from there. It is the power of history. Let's reflect a bit. In his 2013 book entitled Flashes of Thought, Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum, leader of Dubai in United Arab Emirates, says, I'm quoting from the book, "Can you imagine that the gross income of UAE has increased by over 190 times within 40 years? Also, that there were only 74 public and private schools in the UAE in 1971. Today, we have more than 1,200 schools. In 1971, the UAE had not more than 7 hospitals. Today, there are 90 hospitals and over 2,000 primary healthcare centers in the public and private sectors. In 1971, the country had no more than 40 graduates and no universities, but thousands of jobs that needed graduates. Today, we have 73 colleges and universities with tens of thousands of students. All of these and much more. He makes the point that it is clear to him that the driving force behind UAE founding fathers' tireless efforts was nothing other than their quest to please people and ensure their comfort. That the quest of the founding fathers of the UAE was nothing other than their quest to please people and ensure their comfort. And I can say they have achieved it. You know, my first trip to the UAE was an eye-opener. I saw the power of inspiring leadership, whether democratic, monarchical, or the China model. Then, what leads to great leadership? Is it a system of government or the purity of intention of the leadership? Did we have that in the politics of the First Republic? Did Awolowo, Azikiwe, and Ahmadu Bello not try to develop their regions? How come they could not manage their politics? So Ahmadu says in this way, our leaders succeeded in building a nation, while elsewhere, established countries were destroyed by leaders driven by different priorities. The civil war in Nigeria was a failure of leadership, a total failure of leadership. See, I want to let's read this book, Why We Struck, by Adewale Ademuyiga. He says, unlike those military leaders who cashed in on our revolution and ruled the people carelessly and without direction, we would certainly have created a mass political movement which would lead and vigilantly guide the nation along the path of pure democratic socialism. This would have meant that the army would see itself not as an army of occupation which indulged itself in political reaction, revisionism, economic robbery, corruption, and sabotage, as it did under the regimes of Ironsi and Gowon, but an army that is an integral part of the people, ideologically linked with them, economically employed with them, educationally trained with them, and socially adjusted to them. With the social structure of Nigeria at the time, would Nzeogwu and Co. have been able to implement this ideal? This ideal enunciated here by Ademuyiga Was it a realistic ideal, or they were just being idealistic? They said they wanted to build an army that is an integral part of the people. An army ideologically linked with the people. An army economically employed with the people. Educationally trained with the people. And socially adjusted to the people. There would neither be need for the army to be separate from the people, nor excluded from politics. The army would never have remained an instrument of force and coercion. That means the army would have been the people. The army would have been the politics. I'm thinking, is this pragmatic? We'll come to an edition where we will review Nzeogwu's Coup speech. We'll do a critical review of that speech, examine it, and use that speech to define the character of the planners and the executioners of the January 15th, 1966 coup. Ademoyega says if the army was made to see itself as part of the people, to embrace the same ideology as the people under a revolutionary and not a political party system, and if the army was turned into a productive army, a productive arm of government, then it would neither have been used as an instrument to sponsor political riots. That means the army would be embedded in the people. How would Awolowo operated in this system? Help me break it down. Call on WhatsApp 080 999 18449. Yes, call that number. The number is on the screen. 080 999 18449. Now let me take you into another story. That story will create an understanding of the politics of the First Republic. Hello, Pedro Olayemi. You are on.
Good evening.
Good evening to you.
Yeah. As other people will say from Canada, from Australia, I'm enjoying your program there.
Thank you.
Nigeria too. So concerning the question you asked, I think the problem those guys will have or will have had there will be who will be the leader. But I think influences will come from places like maybe America, UK. You understand? They want their own leader. When okay, yeah, a coup has taken place, but American or maybe UK, the foreign influences will come. We'll be like, okay, who can we talk to? Who is the weak link among these guys? So I think they will have that problem. And if Awolowo is going to be a part of the government, yes, Awolowo will definitely be a part. Going by all you've read and all I've read in the past concerning their mindset, but would Awolowo be the leader? I think that is a no. Because they will even have issue among themselves, because they will have issues. Just always like that. Someone will be among them, that will be a weak link, that will want to scatter everything, that will not want to agree. Because even in the process of executing the coup, they have problems. Some people couldn't even take out their own assignment. So, not to take much of your time, that's what I've thought so far. And I want you to do me a favor. There was this interview you had with Oloye Lekan Alabi. I think that's his name. He mentioned Adewale Ademoyega that he had an interview with him. It was about playing it on PCOS. I think TC OS then, according to him, and was called to stop the tape or something like that. So, and the man was even in that interview, I think he was ready to talk about the details, because I like it when I'm reading about the first coup and I'm reading about the first coup, the account of Adewale Ademoyega. I would like to know more about the man. Like, I want to feel their energy, and so people that there's only one person that writes about the coup among them. I've listened to a lot of interview, and let me not take too much of your time. Continue with this. I'm enjoying it.
Thank you, Pedro Olayemi. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see what Nigerian newspapers are saying. Let's look at the newspapers. We have The Guardian here. LP leadership verdict alters opposition politics ahead of 2027. Is that the end of the crisis in the Labour Party? But Peter Obi has joined the ADC. So what happens? Alex Oti is still in the Labour Party. So if Peter Obi doesn't get the presidential ticket of the ADC, will he go back to the Labour Party? So we'll wait to hear from the courts about the PDP. Atiku PDP fought federal government police over kidnap of 163 worshippers in Kaduna. U.S. plans options to protect Christians in Nigeria soon. The details of that story is on page 3 of The Guardian. This is The Guardian. Yeah. The Guardian. That's The Guardian. Also on the front page of The Guardian, World Economic Forum. Trump swaps consensus for hard power rhetoric as federal government showcases reform. Khan demands rescue of Kaduna worshippers as police confirm abduction. Nigeria accounts for 63% of West Africa's diesel import from India. How come? Is Dangote not producing enough diesel? Nigeria accounts for 63% of West Africa's diesel import from India. Glencore, AFC, Mauritius Bank, Fidelity sue FBN trustees, Sulu Gambari. So you want to get details of this story? You have to get The Guardian or go on their website and read more. Federal government affirms plan to abolish HND, empower polytechnics to award degrees. So HND is about to die. But did we get values from establishing the polytechnics? They were supposed to aid the technological takeoff of Nigeria. They were supposed to improve on technical education. But what did we get? They started operating like universities. And now the country says it has no use of the polytechnic anymore. The polytechnics should now award degrees. We'll see how that works out. On the back page of The Guardian, simplifying the bail process in criminal prosecution, David versus State. It's an article written by Ebun Olu Adegborua. 2026 World Cup playoff. FIFA's silence on DR Congo worries NFF. So read more. Those are some of the latest stories from Nigeria. Okay, we have another caller here. Hello.
Hello, good evening, Mr. Edmond Bello.
I greet you.
Yeah, it's good to call into your station today. I've been a fan and an active listener of your program.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, what I want to add is that Nzeogwu's speech was the greatest speech ever written in the political history of Nigeria. And I think what he came close to achieving was that a lot of people might not agree with it, but what he came to achieving was that Leninism. You know, that Leninism, that standard that Lenin achieved in the Soviet Union. So a lot of students today still look up to Nzeogwu. So I think if they had come into power, if the coup had succeeded, Nzeogwu would have represented the most important part of the country as at then, which was the North. He would have given the North education, put the North where it ought to be. Awolowo would have represented the West. And maybe even Zeke would have represented the East. We would have gone far beyond where Gowon took us. Sorry to be very direct, but Gowon was not what was expected. Gowon was weak. There was Ejo. There was the other guy. What's his name? The guy who took up the counter coup.
Murtala Mohammed. The historians of that period would always tell you Murtala was dragging power with Gowon. Even in meetings, he doesn't listen to him. If it was Kaduna as the head of state, Awolowo as a vice president, that would have taken Nigeria in just one decade. They would have taken Nigeria to heights that the whole of Africa will be struggling to catch up. So that is my honest opinion. Thank you for joining the discourse.
Thank you. I want to praise Nzeogwu. I want to praise him very much, and I want to acknowledge Awolowo for his wisdom. Although he dragged ethnicity into it, but he was only trying to stop the North, the strong caliphate in the North. Also want to praise Zeke for his true federalism and everything. So they were not perfect, but we thank them for everything.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
On the front page of the Vanguard, Kaduna abductions, rescue victims now. ACF can, Sukapu, Ekwa, others tell federal government. You know, it's so easy for bandits to walk into communities, snatch people brazenly, take them away, sometimes hold them for more than 6 months, kill some of them. It has become so regular that it has become the norm. And when it becomes the norm, we just accept it and move on. Put yourself in their shoes. Or just imagine me now as we are streaming. They just come in and grab us and take us into the bush. I don't know. Hello.
Hello, Mr. Bello.
I greet you.
Good evening. You're doing a good job.
Thank you.
Yeah, my name is Edi Bokwe. I'm calling from Italy. Now, as to the question, whether or not I don't remember what question it was as to what would Nzeogwu have done. Could you please remind me of what that question was, please? I've forgotten what that question was.
You know, I've raised more than 6 questions. One,
yes.
Was Awolowo meant to be the main beneficiary? Then I raised, the last question I raised was that the ideals that Adewale propounded in his book, Democratic Socialism, how the army would melt into the people. I asked if it was realistic or idealistic.
Okay. You see, I want to look at it like this. Whether or not Awolowo would have accepted to head a government that resulted from a coup is a different matter. Awolowo was a principled man, was a principled politician. Yes, he had his, run-ins with the Bello government and the northern oligarchs. However, I do not think that he would have accepted to head a government, or even to play a subordinate role to a government headed by a younger, less experienced military fellow. Nzeogwu at the time was 29 or 28, if I'm not mistaken. So I do not see Awolowo that was better educated, better experienced, who knew the implication of serving under some young military officers. I do not think he would have done that. And then, even if he had accepted it, I think the upheaval that would have consumed Nigeria would have been far worse than what we saw during the Civil War. Because, as we all know, the system was configured in such a way as to put the Northerners in the realm. I mean, in the hem of governance of Nigeria. So that the coup that scuttled that very system, definitely didn't go well with the Northerners, and it still wouldn't have gone well with them. So Awolowo would have had him very, very much. Besides, recall that they had thrown him to jail, and for him to come out from jail to take a place of a northern prime minister who was assassinated in a coup, I don't think Awolowo would have done that. And I think what happened during the Civil War would have been like a child's play, But however, personally, being I'm an Igbo person, right? I would want to think that regardless of the good intentions Nzeogwu had, I think they exhibited a lot of naivety that, in the way, people were killed, forgetting as a matter of fact that even at that very point in time, such action was, in that kind of way, in that kind of bloody manner, was unproductive. He could have done, probably carried away by, youthful exuberance and all of that. I think they did what they did. Even in the post-coup interview, he was being flippant and speaking in a kind of way that showed that even though a lot of people were killed, he didn't really bother. I think that very action, as a matter of fact, was like right over the top that actually was misread and then snowballed into what everybody now knows as the Civil War. And another thing is the fact that there was this contradiction. Some people call him a villain, and yet this same Nzeogwu was given a state burial. He was given a state burial, as a hero, as a patron or whatever. And yet his action resulted in the killing of so many people and destruction of property on both sides, as a matter of fact. So I just want to stop there. I just want to take a lot more of the time. I appreciate what you're doing. Thank you so very much. I'm a little bit older, I'm right at 54, so I know a little bit of some of these things, So, but then again, thank you so very much, because you go right deep into where a lot of us are not able to go to. You read a lot, and I appreciate you, my brother. Thank you so much.
Thank you. He has also raised some fundamental points. And let's explore some of the points he has raised. Now, one of the best books you can read on Nigerian history is this book, Nigeria, Africa's Failed Asset. Nigeria, Africa's Failed Asset, written by Sir Olaniwun Ajayi. Olaniwun Ajayi was an Awolowo man. These were people who could die for Awo. I wouldn't want to call them Awolowo boys. They were great intellectuals too. Okay, let's take this call. Hello? Yes, I can hear you.
I want to speak on the state of affairs.
Yes, go ahead. The ball is in your court.
Okay. So, I've been listening to your program, and I'm really enjoying your program. You're doing very well. I'm a lover of books as well. So what I just want to say is that the boys or the young men that did the coup in 1966 actually truncated our democracy. And we should be very careful in ideologizing them. I feel that the politicians had problems, which is normal. For instance, the ex-Attorney General of the Federation is with the EFCC as we speak. And the country is continuing. That does not mean the military should come. So politicians will always solve their problem and learn from it. So the corruption that led Nzeogwu and his people to have the coup in 66. Now, follow it through to Gowon, Moritala, Bangida, Buhari, Abacha. So it was even worse than those of the civilians that they came to replace. So that's my opinion. And I also feel that those guys were too young to understand the full implications of what they were doing. In life, it is important to know that a good intention does not always justify the outcome of an action. So everything must be looked into holistically. So I feel that in as much as we look back to the early independence era, we should also encourage the people, our young people, to look into history. That is an important reason why I follow your programs all the time. So we should look at the history and learn from the so-called founding fathers, where they probably heard, discuss it dispassionately, and learn from their mistakes so that we don't commit the same mistake in our time. So that's just what I want to say. And I must emphasize that I really appreciate your program. You're doing very well. May God Almighty continue to strengthen you and provide more resources for you to continue to educate us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I appreciate that you're always there. So let's read from Pa Olaniwun Ajayi's book, Nigeria, Africa's Failed Asset. Here's the book. Let's read from page 74. He says, meanwhile, the Action Group's motion for self-government in 1956 came. It will be recalled that at its 1952 conference in Benin City, the Action Group passed a motion calling for self-government by 1956. Anthony Nahuru, an Action Group member, put the motion down in the House of Representatives on the 31st of March, 1953. This created an uproar, excitement, and stir in the House of Representatives. For one thing, among others, the motion put the issue of self-government on the agenda. Again, the motion heightened the fears of the North about the ambitions of the South. If the motion should go through, the North feared independence in 1956 would mean domination of the North by the South. While the fallout from the Action Group motion was raging, riots broke out in Kano, not unconnected with the reaction of Northern leaders to the motion and the annoying and embarrassing manner in which the Action Group supporters in Lagos abused and insulted them. Quite a few lives were lost, with the personal injuries sustained by many during the Kano riot. The incident led to the passing of the famous 8-point motion program by the Northern House of Assembly and Northern House of Chiefs. The 8-point motion went thus. So, Olaniwun Ajayi listed the 8-point motion in the Northern Region House of Assembly. If you read these motions, you would understand the split that would later lead to the flawed 1964 election, to the severely flawed 1965 Western Region election, and you would see the anger that the January coup brought, and you will see the consequences of the counter coup of July 1966. If you read down, Olaniwa Ajayi accessed primary data to make some of the conclusions he made in this book. He says, in all, the activities, operations, and consultations spearheaded by the Colonial Office, a number of destructive, deadly, and wicked things were going on against the interest, good fortune, and socio-economic and political stability of Nigeria. He says, with the exception of Abubakar Tafawa Balewa, all other Nigerian political leaders had unpublishable and unpleasant names with the officials of northern Nigeria and the Colonial Office. They all engaged in pernicious maneuver, harmful deception, and shenanigans. As umpires, the British behaved as painfully biased and prejudicial umpires lacking in even-handedness. He says, although T.B. Williamson, Assistant Secretary, Head of the West African Department, in his basic brief on Nigeria for Sir James Robinson on the 14th of April 1955, described Awolowo as able and hardworking, while in contrast, Sherwood Smith saw Awolowo as aspirant Nigerian Nkrumah in his note to Sir James Robinson in March 1957. See, why I like this book is the detailed nature of the research Olaniwa Ajayi carried out. You know, I spoke to him before he died. I had that interview with him when he was 91. When he was 91. He was still energetic. Okay, let's feel his voice. I remember asking him, would the North accept restructuring? I had this interview with him in 2016. That was 10 years ago, and he died that same year. And it was a good moment with him because I wanted to discuss with somebody who knew Awolowo well, somebody who ate with Awolowo. So it was not just the interview. I wanted to gain knowledge from the off interview. You know, there are certain things some of these men don't say when you put the mic in front of them. But when the mic is off and you are having a heart-to-heart talk, you are lectured on history, on politics and power. When I knew he died, I smiled. I smiled because I knew I had a copy of his book, Nigeria, Africa's Failed Asset. To me, that was the gift he left for me. And for a man who gave me this kind of gift,
the North is ready for a restructured Nigeria?
He's not dead.
Well, I
Olaniwa Ajayi is on
will
my palm.
prayerfully hope.
For nations to rise, the human spirit must rise. Olaniwu's spirit is in this book. Let's feel his voice.
Do you think the North is ready for a restructured Nigeria?
Well, I will prayerfully hope so, because it is the only blessing that Nigeria may have. But I know they will feel a bit tardy in doing so because they profit a great deal about the present structure of the country, which is against political geometry, absolutely contrary to political geometry, completely. We are different nationalities, different countries. We don't have proper federal system. We should have true federal system. If you have true federal system, there will be peace and progress in this country. We have been sovereign for 56 years, and we are like a small child of 3 or 5 years who cannot walk. If you compare us with Brazil and Malaya and Singapore and Russia and India, where are we? Yugoslavia has about 6 or 8 different nationalities, just as Nigeria has. And Yugoslavian people have been clamoring for self-determination, each nation in Yugoslavia. And their leaders have said, no, the more the merrier, let us all go together. Over the years, centuries,
But
the last of
Bronze
them,
Tito was able to keep them.
listen to me. The last of them was Joseph Tito. Joseph Tito was an army man, a general. He said, my people, I'm sorry, I can't allow us to give self-determination to each of this nationality. We should go together. In any case, he died. When he died, then the people got together, they held a meeting, 1, 2, 3, they all failed. In any case, what did you get? Because they were not allowed to go their separate ways. What did you get? Since 1989, they started to kill one another, and they killed one another for 10 years. The last of their leaders was arrested about 3 or 4 years ago. That was the last one. He's now undergoing trial in Hague. So that is the sort of thing we are trying to avoid. Nigeria is not a country. Nigeria consists of so many nations, leading nations. The sea geopolitical zone, let them go in their separate ways. You will see marvelously rapid development. Look at Czechoslovakia. And, Czechoslovakia was like Yugoslavia. Czechoslovakia consisted of Czechs and Slovaks. They were together for centuries. But Slovaks never liked the union for a long time. So they wanted to pull out. So they went to their parliament and passed a resolution that they should get out of the union. Then they went out and prevailed on the Czechs to pass similar resolutions. And the Czechs agreed. The Czechs passed similar resolution, and then they called a meeting of both sides. Then they shook each other's hand, Slovaks and Czechs, and everybody, each went its way. So Czechs is very happy, making progress. Slovak, well, not unhappy, because they are not as wealthy, as good, as rich as the Czechs. But they too, they are managing their affairs, they are carrying on, except corruption is there.
Are you saying we should not take for granted the recent agitation by some young men in the eastern part of the country, the Nnamdi Kanus of this world?
Look, if I were in charge in this country, I will call them to a table and discuss with them.
So that's the voice of Sir Olaniwun Ajayi, the author of the book Nigeria, Africa's Failed Asset. On page 76 of his book, one distinguishing feature of this book is that I asked him, how did you get most of the documents published in this book? He said he went to the London archives and he got out some of those documents. So this book is like Nigeria's colonial history. So there's one document published in this book. And it is a document, a memorandum that the Secretary of State for the Colonies, Oliver Lyttelton, wrote to the British cabinet on the 17th of August, 1953. So Olaniwan Ajayi published the breakdown, but I want to read this part of the memorandum. So Oliver Lyttelton, in this memorandum, tried to define Nigeria to his leaders in Britain. Remember the 1954 Lyttelton Constitution? Okay, so that is where the name comes from. Oliver Lyttelton was the Secretary of State for the Colonies. So he wrote to Britain saying that Nigeria is inhabited by many races, and no doubt the delegates would give the anthropologists some pause. They were preparing for a constitutional conference at this time. So the Secretary of the Colonies wrote a report on the conference. He says, through their cranial differences, he could perhaps trace some of the 12 races of Nigeria. For my purposes, it's enough to point to three main divisions: the Hausa and the Fulani of the north, Muslims and warriors. That's how he defined the Hausa Fulani, Muslims and warriors, with the dignity, courtly manners, high bearing, and conservative outlook which democracy and the Daily Mirror have not yet debased, and the Yoruba West and the Igbo East, pagan or Christian, with higher education and lower manners. This is a report from the man who was preparing the ground for Nigeria's independence. So he was describing the different tribes. He is writing a memorandum to Britain, to the Prime Minister, to British Parliament, describing the different tribes of Nigeria. He says the Fulani, Hausa of the north, Muslims and warriors, with the dignity, courtly manners, high bearing, and conservative outlook. High bearing, courtly. They are not rascals. Then he defines Yoruba West and Igbo East as pagans or Christians with higher education and lower manners. But in Yoruba land, you have almost equal Muslims and Christians. But they are not conservative. That is why you don't see it. Like Ibadan can be said to be a Muslim city. But you don't see it. Because the daddy might be Muslim and the mommy will be Christian. And the first child will follow mommy to church. The second child will be following daddy to mosque. And they will come home and live peacefully. You won't even know there's any religion in the house. That is the Yoruba nature. So let's continue. Yoruba West and Igbo East, pagan or Christian, with higher education. They have higher education, the Igbo and the West, compared to the North. But they have lower manners and inferior fighting value. Lower manner and inferior fighting value. They are not warriors. He said they are somewhat intoxicated with nationalism, though loyal to the British connection at least, so long as it suits them. See, they are somewhat intoxicated with nationalism, though loyal to the British connection at least, so long as it suits them. So from this definition, who do you think the British favored? From this definition in this memorandum, was it a surprise that power was handed over to the North? he goes on in the memorandum to say that the northern spokesman is Abubakar Tafawa Balewa. His sobriquet, the golden voice of the north, a natural orator with real eloquence, nearly perfect English, and all the art of modulation at his command. It's like he's even toasting Tafawa Balewa. But Tafawa Balewa speaks sweet English. That's the truth. I'm going to bring you his voice at some point. You know, you listen to their speeches. They called him the golden voice of Africa, not the North. He spoke so eloquently. And you wouldn't even know he was a primary school teacher. But teachers at that time were well trained. They were some of the best educated people. It's not now we relegate teachers. So having defined Balewa in those words, he said the northern spokesman is Abubakar Balewa. His sobriquet, the golden voice of the north, a natural orator with real eloquence, nearly perfect English, and all the arts of modulation at his command. He says the East is represented by Dr. Azikiwe, an American-educated demagogue who makes few interventions but is able, persuasive, apparently moderate, and wholly unreliable. The Azikiwe was unreliable. This was the colonial secretary defining the political leaders. He said the West is led by Awolowo with a flood of words, always on the same wavelength. Awolowo doesn't have modulation. That his words are on the same wavelength. You know, Tafawa Balewa would say, fellow countrymen and women, in this age, he comes down, we will rise. Modulation. He said that Awolowo doesn't have modulation. All his words are on the same wavelength. I wonder why that was important to him. Awolowo with a flood of words, always on the same wavelength. A lawyer with considerable legal equipment and outstanding ambition. Awolowo was ambitious, right? He said Awolowo is more reliable than his Eastern colleague. That Awolowo is more reliable than Zik. Then he goes on to say the last two, that is Awolowo and Zik, are in an unholy, but I believe, temporary alliance. He was right. Because Awolowo and Zik could not align. They could not align. You can call them cat and rat. So Oliver Littleton is defining them. Let's take this call. Hello? Okay. So the last two are in an unholy, but I believe temporary alliance. I can only claim as chairman to have concealed, I hope completely, the mounting impatience and deepening cynicism with which I have looked out upon this motley assembly, tackling the niceties of constitutional balance. Who wants to read more? If you want to read more of the descriptions here, you have to get this book, Nigeria, Africa's Failed Asset, by Olaniwu Ajayi. Now, Toyin Falola, in this interview, tries to define Awolowo's and Ahmadu Bello's cultural philosophy. A cultural philosophy that defined the politics of the northern region and the eastern region, and the Western region, even in the Eastern region, that eventually defined the politics of Nigeria. Toyin Falola is a renowned professor of history. He is on state affairs.
When the British conquered Nigeria and began to govern, 1914 amalgamation, diverting southern resources to govern the north, it benefited all those emirs and the native authorities. Remember, in the formation of Nigerian political parties, the Fulani are the ones, the only one in the entire union, able to walk the success of 19th century politics into the federal system. How? Remember, because it's a conversion of the caliphate into the NNPC under the slogan, one north, one party. Awolowo tried that by reviving the Urudua, but it wasn't successful because there was nothing he could fall on similar to the caliphate. The Yoruba did not produce equivalent. In the 19th century, the Yoruba were fighting one another for 100 years. So they did not have the equivalent of that dominant conquest that Feudal and the Fulani did. So very quickly, in building federal Nigeria, they were able to do that. You remember, the most prominent politician until 1960, until the coup, his name, Ahmadu Bello.
Mm-hmm.
Remember his title, that we call him Sultan. Ahmadu Bello.
Saudana?
Yeah, we call him Saudana. He was qualified to be a Sultan. If he had moved that line. He was a most successful politician connected with the caliphate.
And he defined that philosophy. He represented it.
Yes. They were not hiding it.
He controlled it from the north.
Yes, they were not hiding it. But that structure has been there since the 19th century. Awolowo, Azikiwe could not create that structure because the Igbo were fragmented. It was Biafra that united the Igbo people. Before then, they were fragmented. Azikiwe was moving towards secularism, less of nationalism. That's what he was moving in the direction. But Sadana was not moving in that direction. And Awolowo said, nah, well, we have Ilefe. We all said we all descended from one father, Odudua. You know, before he founded Action Group, you know, he founded Egwem Odudua. Saying, let's use Odudua to create a mythology.
Was he trying to unify the Yoruba?
Yes. They made up the story to connect it to politics.
They made up the story?
Yeah, to connect to politics. And not all the elements, but they accentuated the story. Because there was a pre-Odudua period. There were the Ugbo. The Awujale created his own story that they were not connected to Ilefe. They're from the Sudan. But that Egwem Odudua walked up to a point, but not as effectively as that of the caliphate. Because by the late 50s, the story began to unravel. Remember, they removed Adeyemi as the Oni of Ife. They elevated Aderemi.
Oyo?
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Alaafin for you.
Yes, he was removed because he was not buying into that Odudua unity framework. And remember, the NCNC was strong. So the best way to explain it, 1866, the Yoruba fought the 16 Years' War.
The Kiriji War?
Yes. It was, Latosha began that war, the war to end all wars. So that fourth line in that war also became the fourth line in politics. Subsequently, you remember Elisha You remember Ibadan, Ogbomoso. By the time the MPN was formed, they were following that fourth line of the 19th century. You see Oluloyo winning the election, right? Reviving some of the politics of the Kiriji War in alliance with Ogbomoso that joined them, with Oyo that joined them. And remember when Azik was playing the nationalist game, right? He was also able to split the Yoruba people because fortified NCNC zone included area you now call Elisha. And that became extremely difficult to handle.
You know, in this book, Decolonizing Nigeria 1945 to 1960,
yes.
Politics, Power, and Personality. Some of the points you have explained are well documented here.
And the personalities.
Yes.
The key personalities and what their strategies were.
That's Tony Falola there. This interview you would also find on the channel. We uploaded this interview this morning on the channel. So you can watch the full interview on this subject he just discussed. It's on the channel. We have seen the conservative North. If there is one word we have overflowed in the analysis we started last week, it is feudalism. Feudalism, feudalism, feudalism. We have defined it, but we have not defined it concretely. The reason I brought this book that defines political terms in a lucid way. Now, if you are a student of politics and history, there are certain basic books you should have. I don't mean if you are preparing to write exams, no. I mean if you want to learn, you are pushing yourself. It's not the learning that is inspired by examination. The learning that is inspired by the deep thought to gather knowledge. And in that case, you are personally on the move in search of knowledge. You should have books like this. Politics and Government in Nigeria by Felix Alonge. You should have books like this. Because outside the stories of politics, there are also definitions. Terms like theocracy, gerontocracy, feudalism, anarchism. What does these words mean? How can you use these words in politics? So if you have a book like this, Politics and Government in Nigeria, by Felix Alonge, you would have also helped yourself to understand the basic terms of politics and government. It's a big book. Let's see how many pages? 618 pages. Politics and Government in Nigeria provides an in-depth analysis of the art of governance. The book shows the underlying theories, principles, institutions, mechanisms, and processes that are involved in the management of the affairs of the state. The book covers extensively topics on government, political science, history, law, and civic education. Written in simple but elegant language, the book has been divided into 4 broad parts that take the reader through the basic concepts and principles of government to the dynamics and complexities of politics in contemporary Nigerian society. Consequently, each part of the book has been broken down into related and manageable chapters for easy understanding. The book is therefore an invaluable asset to students, politicians, and administrators who desire to excel in public examinations and the art of governance.
Hello.
Hello, you want to join the discussion?
Yes, I'm the one. I'm calling from UK. I saw one of your brokers about Awolowo, Ironsi, and all this, and Ubara, everything. I've already emailed you. My name is Patrick Chibwe. I'm a UK based. I'm from Delta State in Nigeria, from Ibuzo. But you told me this, So that's just it.
Thank you. Thank you for calling in. Do you want to make any contribution because we are live?
Hello. Regionalism. Hello.
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 Yes, I can.
Is that Mr. Bello?
Yes, I'm on it.
God bless you, sir. God bless you. I've been following your programs for a long, long time. Today I was with my brother Patrick, and we were just listening. He was listening to that the story of the Civil War. The thing is that I have myself been a researcher on this matter for close to 30, 40 years. Because I was always very curious as to how the army got into politics in Nigeria and the things that were happening. And as a young man, those stories were all the stories we heard. All those beer parlor stories they were always telling us. Mr. Bill, are you still there?
I'm with you. I'm listening.
Yes. So when Babangida came out recently, because I was always, how can I put it? I followed the story of the Civil War. I read the Frederick Forsyth's story, the Biafran story. I also read a number of, but I got access to a copy of Ojukwu's diaries, Civil War diaries, and I read that also. And there used to be one book by somebody Centaurus or somebody like that those days. It was a very fat book on the Nigerian Civil War, very, very big. It was an authoritative book in those days, as well as a book of photographs, which was compiled by one Lagos photographer. It was about the Nigerian Civil War. So when I started seeing your programs, especially because of the internet, and started watching a number of programs here, I was always very touched by your research, because all those books most of those books you have there, like Nzeogwu, like Why We Struck, I bought some of those books. The funny thing was that, like my own copy of Why We Struck, and the Biafran story, and Ojukwu's diary. The funny thing was that I bought them on the same day. I live in London, you see, and sometimes when they clear out houses here, people might not be able to pay their rent. Then, after a while, people they go and clear the house. So you might just discover that I bought these things in the second-hand market. I couldn't believe it. The day I saw all of them, and I saw all of them in the same place, I was, and there were even some books by some colonial administrators. So there was even a book. There's I don't know if you know, there is a Why They Struck.
Okay.
There's a book called Why They Struck. This was written from the northern perspective.
Yes.
You understand? There's a book like that. Why They Struck. So there's Why We Struck and there's Why They Struck. You understand? So, and I happen to have that book also came along with the other ones that I saw in the second show.
Okay, I am on a live show. I'm on a live show. I hope you know.
You're on a live show. Oh, okay.
I'm on a live show. I thought you wanted to contribute to the show.
Okay.
All right.
Oh yes. What are you discussing today?
Just go on my YouTube page. I'm on a live show now. If you're on YouTube, I'm on live show. I thought you wanted to contribute to it.
Okay. Oh, okay. No, Patrick. No, maybe Patrick wants to contribute. Yeah, Patrick, you say something.
All right. Thank you. Okay. I discovered that it was taking me too far. I needed to call his attention to that. Okay. I was talking about this book, Politics and Government in Nigeria, by Felix Alonge. So Felix Alonge will help us understand what Awolowo meant by feudalism. On Tuesday's edition, I read this book by Awo, The Travails of Democracy and the Rule of Law. It's a primary text for this show. This is another primary text for the show. So if you read there, Awolowo used certain terms in this book, and that is why I brought Felix Alonge. Awolowo used the term, one of the things that the action group was set out to do was to destroy the very basis of this feudal concept. Feudal concept. So the action group was out to destroy feudalism. So what is feudalism? Let's look at Alonge's book. Alonge says feudalism is a system of government based on the hierarchy of land ownership or holding. It is a social system in which political power is derived from control over land. In other words, it is a system of government based on land tenure system. Land ownership is the basis for exercising political power. Possession of land determines political rights and duties of the people. It shows the hierarchy order of land ownership. Land ownership mainly rests on an emperor who has power to grant land to tenants, who in turn sublet it to those over whom they exercise power and influence. That is the serfs. The emperor receives rent and present from those to whom their estate or fief are let out. At the apex of the pyramid is the emperor, followed by the lords. Feudalism was practiced in the Middle Ages in Europe, but in Awolowo's time, in Ahmadu Bello's time, Awolowo accused Ahmadu Bello of practicing feudalism in the north. Let's look at it. So one of the things we set out to do was to destroy the very basis of this feudal concept. The action group made the point repeatedly that sovereignty over the people was vested in the people themselves, that no one was born to rule, and that only those who were freely elected by the people were entitled to administer their affairs for a prescribed period of time. In a feudal land, in a feudal system, the people don't have the kind of power Awolowo wanted them to have. Sovereignty over the people was vested in the people themselves. That is not in feudalism. In a feudal state, Ahmadu Bello was like the emperor. Awolowo continues, one day, the Saldana, after a series of public meetings and rallies, stopped at a catering rest house to have lunch. He took out his handkerchief, sneezed into it, and found that his nostrils were filled with dust. He looked at the handkerchief with obvious dismay, shook his head, and said in a voice that carried the depth of his feeling of utter revulsion and resolution, "I shall never forgive Chief Awolowo for this." With the inimitable Saldana himself mounting the rostrum to appeal to those he regarded as his own serfs for votes, all the members of the hierarchy, including the then incumbent Prime Minister, Abubakar Tafawa Balewa, lost no time in following his example. We of the AG regarded this reaction as a very welcome and salutary augury for democratic practice in Nigeria. However, for the entire feudal hierarchy, all that was too much for them. Entire feudal hierarchy. You see? So did Awolowo succeed in breaking the feudal hierarchy? You know, in the north, you still have the Talakawas, the poor. They don't have land. So who owns the land? Following the land reform that the Obasanjo government implemented in the 1970s. Who owns the land? So another book you should read is The Travails of Democracy and the Rule of Law. Classic. Politics and Government in Nigeria by Felix Alonge. Another book you should read. Now let me tell you the story. This story reminds us of the politics of that era. It's a politics that also reminds us of contemporary times. The Vanguard. Losses to fraud in banks decline. CBN intensifies measures. Court sacks Abure, orders INEC to recognize Nenandi-led LP. Federal government to scrap HND dichotomy. Empower polytechnics to award degrees. Davido's dad breaks silence amid son's paternity saga. Says I have 14 grandchildren. Kaduna abductions. Rescue victims now. ACF can. Sukapu Ekwa orders tell federal government. Can President Fort's police statement demands safe rescue of worshippers. Governor Sani proactive despite conflicting reports. It is an act of violence. Release abductees, PFN says. You'll find these stories on the front page of the Vanguard. Why we suspended Awujale selection processes. Ogun government speaks. 5 soldiers killed, many injured in Borno Boko Haram suicide attack. You want to read more of that story? You will turn to page 6 of the Vanguard. Financial inclusion. Nigeria still behind target, says the CBN. Oil thieves operating more sophisticated networks. That is coming from NAV Component Commander. Bandits always renege on peace deals. Article speaks. Those are the headlines on the front page of the Vanguard newspaper. We have looked at the Guardian. Let's look at the Daily Sun. Kaduna church abduction. Kidnappers contact victims' families. Demand 17 motorcycles to free 177 abductees. Community request apology from police for initial denial of church abductions. They will return safely, Governor Sani assures. On the front page of the Daily Sun, 183 billion Labour Ministry budget raises red flags as agencies fund roads, stadia, and palace. How? Oil slips below Nigeria's budget line as oversupply fears rattle market. Awujale stool. Ogun government halts selection process over petitions, security reports. EFCC hands over 1.28 billion recovered from Sujimoto to Enugu government. Those stories are on the front page of the Daily Sun. On the back page of the Daily Sun, the Nestor oil case and the irritant. An article written by Muiz Banire, the Nest oil case and the irritant. Okay, I will read this at the end of the show. Let's look at the Punch. Kidnappers hold 166 Kaduna worshippers. Demand 29 million deposit. Deposit? You can still call as we round up the show. You can call as we round up the show. The number is on the screen. Otis LP Block, seek reconciliation as court sacks Abure. Awujale stool battle, Ogun Hot's process, police storm palace. Royal Rumble, inside power struggle rocking Oyo Oba's Council. Counter-terrorism campaign. Federal government moves to fast-track trial of 5,000 insurgents. Military police, NSCDC budget 204 billion naira for operations in 2026. Security agencies to harvest DNA of notorious terror kingpins. Security agencies to harvest DNA of notorious terror kingpins. Court issues bench warrant against Tunji Bello linked suspects. This Tunji Bello guys, or Toji Bello, Toji, not Tunji, Toji Bello. That is the Zamfara bandit that is holding Sokoto to ransom. Death toll hits 29 in Pakistan mall fire. Dozens missing. You find that headline on the front page of the Punch. ICPC to arraign Ozekome on Monday over UK property. DNA test cleared Davido in paternity disputes, says father. On the back page of the Punch newspaper, Tinubu's taxman, another surgeon without painkillers. That's an article written by Bimbola Adelakun. Tinubu's taxman, another surgeon without painkillers. Morocco versus Senegal, AFCON's final fiasco. You know, I didn't even watch any match throughout the tournament, but I was watching snippets of the goals on social media, the fracas, and I wasn't happy that the Senegalese players walked off the pitch. I felt they should have been more patient, play the game. You know, sometimes football can be so emotional. Both sides wanted to win, and they felt the referee wasn't fair. Yeah, sometimes the referees struggle with their decisions, but that was not enough reason to walk off the field in a final game. Anyway, he also made it interesting. They made history. At the end of the day, Senegal won. I wish them well. But I know CAF is already wielding the heavy hammer, and it's going to land on the coaches and some of the players. But they should also take it easy. Okay? It was a good game from the 5 minutes I saw online. I'll take my time to go and watch the full game. I hope I'll have the time. All right, as we round off, okay, let me leave this. I wanted to tell you a story. Our politics and the establishment of the Western Region Television. And I also wanted to look at Nnamdi Azikiwe in detail. And by next week, we are going to look at the D-Day, the coup proper, the day they struck. We are going to look at it. And we also find time to look at Nnamdi Azikiwe and his politics. Yes, we have paid attention to Awolowo's argument. Sadly, most of Nnamdi Azikiwe's books are out of print. Unlike Awolowo, we can't find Azikiwe's books to read. But what Awolowo's children did was to set up the Awolowo Foundation. So regularly they reprint Awolowo's books. So you can find Awo's books to read. Just that this one was printed by Awo himself. This is the original print of this book. The original print, not reprint. And you can see the quality of the print. Yes, you have other prints of the Travails of Democracy, recent print, but they cannot be compared to the quality of this print. So the books we have mentioned, you can get these books on udarabooks.com. Now, for some time I've been looking for a book on Ahmadu Bello. Recently I found one. So I hold this book so dearly now. Ahmadu Bello, Sardauna of Sokoto, Values and Leadership in Nigeria. I'm going to read from this book soon. It's a book written by John Panden. It's an authoritative work on Ahmadu Bello. I've been looking for this book. In fact, I found it 2 weeks ago. I've been wanting to read on Ahmadu Bello so that I can have a fair and broad understanding of the man. Because as a researcher, yes, I listen to what other people say, but I also want to read. That is why I'm saying this class is about reading. Don't just believe what I say, or what Awolowo read, or what Awolowo wrote. Also carry out your own research by reading these books, and then form your own judgment of the situation. Ahmadu Bello, Sardauna of Sokoto, Values and Leadership in Nigeria. The book I'll be reading from this weekend. Yes, I've read a lot about him, but I want to read a book dedicated to him. So finally I found this book. How much did I buy this book? I bought this book 55,000 naira. And I was ready to pay 100,000. I was even saying, thank God they charged me 55. I said, it's the only copy they have. I said, okay, thank you. So I paid for it. I like it. So I'll read from this book soon. Now, another book I'm recommending to you before I go is Nzeogwu. We have not read from this book by Obasanjo. Nzeogwu. I've not read from it. Emeka, the biography of Ojukwu. Read these books. You can find them on udarabooks.com. Now, Francis Fukuyama wrote the book The Origins of Political Order. The Origins of Political Order. The Origins of Political Order. We just have 2 copies of this book. Just 2. The Origins of Political Order. Virtually all human societies were once organized tribally. Yet over time, most developed new political institutions, which included a central state that could keep the peace and uniform laws that applied to all citizens. We take these institutions for granted, but they are absent or are unable to perform in many of today's developing countries, with often disastrous consequences for the rest of the world. So The Origins of Political Order by Francis Fukuyama provides a sweeping account of how today's basic political institutions developed. He begins with politics among our primate ancestors and follows the story through the emergence of tribal societies, the growth of the first modern state in China, the beginning of a rule of law in India and the Middle East, and the development of political accountability in Europe up until the eve of the French Revolution. So this is the last call we will take.
Hello, good afternoon.
Hello.
Yeah, good afternoon.
We greet you.
Thank you very much for bringing us all up to speed. I'm calling from Canada. My name is Calvin. I really appreciate all the books you recommended. As a matter of fact, I've sent you some messages on my Nigerian WhatsApp, and I've listed the books that I need, which I will order through udara.com. And you said we can order through WhatsApp as well.
Yes.
Yes. However, the comment I want to make, when Awolowo was released, I do not think that the British would be comfortable to hand over power to him. Because the thing is that anything that looks like them or the trade, they don't want because they believe that it's smarter. That is why they prefer the Northerners. And they hand over power to the Northerners. And if they had given power to him, they could have staged a coup again to remove him because they have the gun. That is my submission.
Thank you. Thank you.
And again, the first ever caller, he said something that really struck me, that if it will be possible that you can have a community, because the people who have at the corridor of power today, they don't have the vision to lead that country forward, because they cannot lead to the future. If we can come together, it might not lead to political party, but people of like mind, they like history. Because my dad too fought he was a military man. He told me some story about the Civil War, and I actually lost an uncle a day the war ended today. The day the war ended, he died a day before they killed him. So he told me a lot of stories about it. That is why I fell in love with the Nigerian Civil War. As a matter of fact, he had a book on 13 years of military rule that was given to him by the military, but the book got lost. But now that I have the opportunity to buy most of the books that the world, like Anabi, Sama, and the likes, it's a good refresher course for me to go over them and read them again.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for all you do. We really appreciate this program. I do really appreciate it, because if we do not carefully sit down and study these things, we will not know where we are coming from or where we are heading. Thank you very much.
Thank you for calling. Okay. We've come to the end of the show. Get the origins of political order. And you see Madiebo's book here. You see them. Madiebo is the author of the Nigerian Revolution and the Biafran War. You know, we'll come to the Biafran War. Oh, it will get so interesting by the time we get there. Wait for it, the Biafran War. We'll come to it. We are just moving. We'll move from the coup, the Nzeogwu coup. We'll now get to the counter coup. And interviews will be played. The counter coup. What was Murtala Muhammad thinking? Who killed Aguiyi Ironsi? Theophilus Danjuma. Then we'll come to the war. You will hear voices. You know, war broadcasts that were made during the war. We are ready for this. So get your friends, get your children to come to State Affairs, the class of history, politics and power. It is a class where we are all learners. To learn is to unlearn. The Nigerian Biafran Revolution, and the Biafran War, classic by Alexander Madiebo. He became the GOC of the Biafran army. He was the one that lured Nzeogwu to drop his revolution and convinced him to travel to Lagos to go and see Ironsi. On getting to Lagos, he was arrested. The last flight by August Okpe. A pilot remembers the Air Force and the Biafran air attacks. Lovely book, The Last Flight. Lovely book. So you can read these books and you can get them on udarabooks.com or through the WhatsApp numbers on the screen. So let's round off on this note. I will leave you with this. We are exposed to servitude as we experience mass atrocities in the names of ethnicity and religion. They are citizens rooted in their cultural and religious heritages, but they are utterly opposed to reason, ethnic and religious tolerance. They dwell on the biases that make a land flowing with milk and honey despondent. Stooping to this tendency is the avoidance of the enlightenment of development. Therefore, peace is rattled as the poison of hatred spreads in the land. No justice, no peace. No peace, no development. That is what you see. And it reminds me of the words of Addison, who says there is no greater sign of general decay of virtue in a nation than a want of zeal in its habitant for the good of the country. Everyone agrees that if Nigeria falls into a total all-out fracas, it would mean an African apocalypse, which would not just be difficult to contain, but will certainly spill over to other nations of the world with disastrous impact. Those are the words of Goodluck Jonathan, a former president of Nigeria. That arrangement, so that we can have Sunday, Tuesday, Thursday, then Saturday morning. Thank you for being there. I am Edmund Obilo.